Hello, flirties. It's me, Benjamin. Hello. Hi. Hi. How are you? How are you doing? How's your day? How's your week? How's your morning? How's your evening? How's your head? How's your heart? How's your soul? How are you feeling? Right? How are you in this moment? Hello. I'm here with you. I'm here for you. And I just wanted to thank you in this intro to the intro for being here, for tuning in, for listening, for streaming, wherever you are in the world. I hope you're enjoying these conversations. I hope you're enjoying these episodes, these topics, these guests. I love creating Flirtations for you, and I so appreciate you being here. Yes. And now a plea, a question, a request, if you will, not a bait and switch, just a part 2 of the intro to the intro, where I'm going to ask that you please rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you have, thank you. A mere 5 stars, maybe a comment, a thumbs up, a written review. Yes, whatever tickles your fancy, whatever is striking you in this moment. If you've already done any of the above, thank you. If you haven't, now's a great time before we get into the full conversation on intimacy and vulnerability with Body Vox. Coming now. Coming up on this episode of Flirtations, we're getting intimate, y'all, literally with certified sex and intimacy coach Body Vox. Court is the founder of the Body Vox, a somatic sex educator, and has been featured in Vogue, Men's Health, Allure, the New York Post, and more. He's worked with individuals and couples all over the world, helping them build deeper awareness in their bodies, relationships, and erotic selves. In today's conversation, we're exploring what intimacy really looks like beyond just the physical, including emotional, intellectual, and even spiritual forms of connection. From breathwork to intentional touch, vulnerability to building trust, we'll talk about the practices and barriers that shape our ability to truly connect. We'll also tackle some of your burning questions like, should you have sex on a first date? Is texting killing the vibe or helping you build connection? Where does attraction really come from? And is attachment all that bad? Spoiler, it's not. And Court's going to tell us why. If you've ever struggled with mixed signals, perfectionism, hookup fatigue, or fear of intimacy, this one's going to reframe the way you think about dating and connection. So, whether you're craving more closeness, working through fear, or just curious how to build stronger connections in your next relationship, or maybe the one you're in right now, this one, it's for you. Let's do this, flirties, and meet Court.
I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt. I heard you wanted to flirt.
Hello, my name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and a gay Libra. Everyone has an inner flirt.
Hey, flirty.
Live, laugh, flirt.
Work the flirt.
Work the flirt.
Delulu is the Salulu.
Expert on the flirt.
Hey, flirty. There's always another flirt.
Everyone has an inner flirt. Get out of your head and into the flirt. Flirties, on the show today is Body Vox, a certified sex and intimacy coach and founder of Body Vox. Court has been featured in Men's Health, Vogue, Allure, and the New York Post, just to name a few. He has worked with hundreds of individuals all over the world and is here today to have a conversation with us about intimacy, eroticism, and authenticity in dating. Hello, Court. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. It's great to see you. I was just commenting before we got here how fantastic your mustache is.
Thank you. Mustache meets beard.
Exactly. Love it.
I'm really grateful to have you on Flirtations today. Thank you for making the time to record this episode with me and with the flirties. Before we get into some of our topics today, I want to learn a little bit more about you, your work, and Body Vox. Yeah, what do you want to share with the flirties?
Well, I am a somatic sex and intimacy coach, which I think is an important distinction. So I work with clients with body-based exercises, experiential learning, and sometimes touch to facilitate learning and growth in my clients. So that's a little bit different than a traditional coach or therapist that's just facilitating through talk therapy. And so, that piece is kind of important to mention. Yeah. I think sex and intimacy from a teaching perspective, there's only so much you can do and teach through words. It would be like learning soccer by me teaching you through a book, but you never get out to practice with anybody, Yeah. So it's sort of like, I am that person that has a lot of knowledge around sexuality, around intimacy, around the body, not just from a brain perspective, but through an embodied perspective. And so kind of bringing that to people. That's how I work.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
We're definitely going to stay here. I want to learn a little bit more about your somatic approaches and how that maybe facilitates change or growth in a way that is different, but also complementary to something that's more traditional, like talk therapy or reading like a good old self-help book, something like that.
Yeah. I think learning is cumulative. Like, some people will be like, you're the thing, this is the work that like really transcended my experience and was a breakthrough for me. And I do remind them, like, look, you've been in therapy for the last 10 years, 3 years, whatever it is. Yeah. You've done a lot of work already. You've had other teachers. And so to not discount all of your teachers along the way, to acknowledge them, that they showed up for you in the space that you were in that moment in time, that they were part of this, journey that you're on, and acknowledging that I'm also a part of a small journey for you or for my clients, and that there will be another teacher that comes along and offers something bigger and more potentially deeper than what I've offered, but you will be different. And so the way that you are receiving it will be different than, what you could have received, 5-10 years ago. So I think it's important to acknowledge our teachers at all stages of our lives, acknowledge that, certain people have different gifts and different skill sets to bring us. And, I have my own talk therapist who I, really enjoy and is very beneficial to me. And I also have colleagues and coaches that I work with that, bring different things to me. And so I think it kind of takes a village.
Yeah. I think so too. Because I'm a yoga teacher, Court.
All right.
Yeah. I'm teaching later today. I teach 5 times a week here locally between Chapel Hill and Durham, North Carolina. Sometimes I get asked, where does your accent come from when it slips out? It's North Carolina. That's what this is.
Awesome.
And I want to hear, I have one more question here before we get into some of the nitty gritty questions about intimacy and dating, because I've been lucky to interview some other practitioners on Flirtations, other somatic experts, whether they be coaches, whether they be facilitators, nervous system, health kind of aficionados. And sometimes it's like, I love that we can have these complementary approaches to growth and healing, whatever it is you're working on with I say traditional, but something like talk therapy, but then also some type of somatic approach. And so where I'm going with this question is like, so much about healing for me and just working through my own emotions and thoughts and experiences has been about moving my body and moving energy. And so when you're working with someone and they come up against that growth edge, right? That point of discomfort where it feels like we want to go back, right? We want to go back to that place in our bodies that feels safe, even though what's familiar isn't exactly safe, So when you're working with someone somatically and they come up against that growth edge, how do you help them through that experience?
I think that, there's a couple of things I want to pack. I want to answer this question first, and then I want to actually come back to yoga as a practice and sex as a practice, intimacy as a practice. So I think, back up a little bit. What was the question again? The main question
about that growth edge. So many of us experience, whether like it's in, the therapist's office or working with Court Vox, right?
Yeah. Thank you. So, I often refer to this as a yellow place. Peter Levine refers to it as a learning edge of resilience, which is sort of like this place that feels a little scratchy. And also like there's an understanding that there's something there to explore. Yeah. As a practitioner, there's a fine line between pushing and sort of holding. And that really is an internal conversation that I have with myself. It's a call that I make in the moment of this is the right time to push, or this is the right time to hold or step back. And and that's a nuance of being a practitioner in this field, is like sort of like listening to what's present and what's available, and also understanding what the client's objectives and intentions and goals are, and helping them meet that. And just acknowledging, look, do you want me to push a little bit here? Mm-hmm. Or do you want me to just hold? And sometimes it is checking in with the client. And, if I'm putting this into relational aspects, right, of being with a partner or a friend of, hey, I have something difficult to share with you. Do you have space for that right now? I have something to clear with you. I have something to share with you. Do you have the capacity for me in this moment? Yeah. And I think most people, they get so anxious around, yes, I need to know what you are telling me now. They don't sink into the actual somatic feeling, which is, actually, I don't have capacity right now. It's been a long day. I'm tired. I feel anxious and upset already. I really would like to hear you. And now is not the time. To have that level of awareness of self is really valuable in relationship. And, as I'm in container with people, that's something that I bring to the table of asking those questions, modeling what a deeper conversation could look like, and then saying to them, what, take a pause before you answer. Take a pause and listen to what's happening in your body. Yeah. Take a breath and notice, do you want to move forward with this, or does this feel like enough for the moment? Yeah. Because I think there's a phrase that says too much, too fast, too soon. And, you can't rush someone's process. The talk about safe space in this type of work really bothers me. I think when we're talking about erotic realms and we're talking about shame and we're talking about trauma and we're talking about, all this stuff, even talking about pleasure, there's so much present there. And I really don't know what people's triggers are. I don't know what their landmines are. And so, and they don't either. And so it's sort of this agreement of, actually, this is really brave space that we're moving into. And for you to go deeper into intimacy with me, deeper into vulnerability with me, this is not just to throw your sheets to the wind. This is take another step, feel into where you are now. Can you trust yourself? Can you trust me? Before you make that next step. This isn't I feel safe and this is a safe space. Let's jump into the deep end. Right. Because I do think that that's not safe.
Right.
So acknowledging that we are in a container that involves risk, that involves risk of spirit and heart and body is important. It's important.
I agree. Thank you, Court. Yeah, we're going to come back to the T word there, trust, here in a few moments. It's definitely on my list of questions I want to ask you about, not just how to trust ourselves in this process of flirting and dating. We're going to be focusing, I say, a focus on from the flirt to the relationship, right? From the flirt to when you're in that relationship. That is really where I feel like I best serve you, even though there are plenty of flirties and relationships listening right now to the show. So hello to you. You're going to get some really great takeaways from this conversation as well. And a few of the things that I feel like I heard were that duality of trying versus forcing, right? That duality of presence, of body, of heart, versus also being in your analytical mind, that monkey mind. It's that process of coming, like I say, get out of your head and into the flirt, about more so feeling your way through all of this rather than trying to think or analyze or sort of future pace your way through it, or maybe bringing some past experiences that weren't so great into a new connection, into a first date, third date, fifth date, whatever. And so a part of this process of self-trust is just being present, and then we're going to explore vulnerability and intimacy as we get more into this conversation.
I think it's very easy to oversimplify that of stop thinking, get out of your head, just feel. Where there is so much there's so much conditioning for us not to feel and for us to override and to gaslight ourselves into no, I could stay here. This is worth my career or this relationship, and I'm just going to stay a little longer. And so there is a constant override of feeling that we do. And so eventually we get really confused of, is this my thinking mind, or is this an actual feeling that I'm having?
Yeah.
And this is where embodied practices like yoga and movement and breath and become really in handy, because you start to put embodied practices together with intentionality and presence. What I was thinking about earlier when you talked about being a yoga practitioner is, it's very easy for us to think about yoga as a practice. And what I love about yoga practice is it's never about perfection.
No.
And thinking about when you go into your yoga practice daily or weekly or whatever it is, there is an inquiry of, can I just allow this to be what it is, instead of pushing this to beyond where my body is today or in this moment.
Yeah.
And I think if we could apply that to our sexual experiences of, this is not, we're not trying to get it perfect. There's no prize at the end of this for you to be the perfect lover or the perfect sex machine or whatever that is.
Yeah.
It is practice makes practice, and a practice is not perfect ever. And, if we can kind of take the practice in and look at it from a space of, where am I today in this practice? And what's the information that is available for me in my body, in my spirit, in my mind? And, using that as a form of personal growth and awareness, and where do I go next? What's the next frontier for me? And so I think, that's available in so many different modalities. And it's not a lot of times in sex, because we get a really shitty sex education that's really focused on, disease and not getting pregnant and shame when we're young. And then we are sent out into the world, and there's this expectation that we're just supposed to be good at it. A lot of us are having sexual experiences that are based on an education we got when we were 12 or 14 years old. And then we wonder why we're bored. We wonder what else there is for us. We wonder why we don't have connection with our partners or even our own bodies. And then it's sort of where do I go? Where do I get this information? Not just from a book perspective, but how do I practice?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what we're going to help the flirties with today. I'm so glad you mentioned that none of this is a simple or easy process. If it were that easy just to turn off your thinking mind, well, we would just do it. It would just happen. But it's, I love also what you said, that a practice is a practice, right?
It's a practice.
Yeah.
Period.
Yeah. I think, I see that all the time from my perspective at the front of the room from students, that I can tell when they're getting a little bit frustrated, or when they're not getting something right, or it's not going the exact way they want it to. Sometimes I'll say, take what you need and leave the rest, or find the movement you need, not necessarily the movement you want, but what you need.
Or what's available.
Or what's available. That's important too. Yeah.
I think, just looking at my own kind of process, that's a constant struggle for me is perfectionism and kind of sitting with what is and what's available, as opposed to what I want and where I want to go.
Yes.
And that is a practice in and of itself of, no, this is where I am today. I'm softer today, or I feel like I need to wrestle, or, listening to and negotiating that with the partners that I have intimate connections with.
Yeah. All right.
Which is another piece of the story.
Perfect segue into intimacy. I want to hear more from you now about that, because I love the way you break down intimacy. I think oftentimes we hear of it phrased or described in just a couple of different ways, emotional intimacy, but also physical intimacy. But yet there's a lot more to it. So how would you describe intimacy?
Yeah, well, I want to start by saying I think that the intimacy that most people are seeking is more of a physical intimacy through sex, and it's I would actually name it more as attraction than intimacy. They're wanting that spark, that aliveness, that initial drive, right? And you mentioned energy earlier, and I look, I think there are energetic forces that we can't really explain. And then there's some that we can. There's definitely like different vibrations that people bring that match ours, and different frequencies. But I think it's also important to look at things like smell. Like, are we attracted to somebody's smell? Are we attracted to somebody's face because they feel familiar to us or exotic? All of these take place, and they're physiological. They're not necessarily energy. They're things that are happening really on a physiological level in our bodies. That initial attraction might stick around, but it does take tending. It takes tending. Intimacy is really about closeness. It's about knowing somebody very deeply, and also from a person who's like me, sharing with you, being able to be vulnerable and open without sort of a fear that you're going to leave or abandon me or shut me down for things that I'm sharing. Because, even in deep, like partnered relationships, there comes the risk of when we do share with someone something really deep, that they will go away. And when we're in partnerships and we are sharing homes and children and families and social lives, there's a lot more at risk, to share something like that. And if you've had an experience where you share with a partner something and they kind of go, no, that's gross, or I'm not going to meet you there, or like, who do you think you are? There starts to build this resistance to intimacy, and it starts to you start to create more masks in order to survive in a relationship, and over time, it can become so big that it's like, I don't even know who I am with you anymore.
Wow.
And I don't feel safe being vulnerable. I don't feel safe being intimate with you. I think there's also being too intimate with someone causes a different kind of challenge, which is, when you know so much about someone, and I'm talking about like day-to-day things where you have like experiential intimacy where you know what time your partner takes a shit in the morning and, they pick their nose in front of you and, things that are just like not that sexy. There's no mystery. There's no allure, which is present in new relationships, right? It's the novelty factor. And most people want security and novelty. It's just trying to figure out the right balance. I also I'm a person that doesn't, I'm not a monogamous human. I've tried.
Gave the old college try.
I failed miserably a few times. And, to step into authentic poly and open relationships is also challenging because there's still a lot of people that would prefer like their own version of monogamy. And to kind of sit with, okay, is it worth kind of sticking it out with this person and continuing to show up in my own authentic truth, which is this is what I want, or do I cave because I really care about this person, I love this person, which in my experience might work in the beginning, but at some point I'm going to come back to actually this is not what I wanted all along. I need that novelty piece. I need other lovers. It's not because I don't love you or care or want to share this life with you. It's more like I need spark, and it actually fuels more desire for you in the end. Yeah, which is because I have freedom. I have freedom to be myself, and that's just one part of intimacy and authenticity of that sexual desire to be with other people. But I think it could be anything from like, this is a creative expression that I have that I need to do, whether that's like crafting or knitting or cosplay. And your partner's like, I don't get it. But I love that for you. It's not my thing, but you go have cosplay weekends at Comic-Con and go to Disneyland and celebrate, Mickey Mouse. But, and that takes quite a bit of maturity also. It does. To have conversations of like, that's not my desire. Mm-hmm. And I do love you, and I want you to have what you want, mm-hmm. and for you to have your authentic expression. And I think there becomes a question around ego there, right? Which is, okay, you love, and I speak of this because I had a partner who was really into Disney characters, and it's just not my jam.
Were they a Disney adult court?
Totally a Disney adult court. And it was sort of like, there was a lot of judgment around it. And it came to was like, there was a little bit of an embarrassment of this is the person I chose. And they have this like silly side of themselves, and I'm associated with them. Like, what does that say about me? Mm-hmm. And really that's about my ego. It's not about them. It's like me feeling like their personal expression and joy affects the way people see me.
Yes.
And, to have that awareness, like, then I get to work with that as a person while I say, you go have that. I love that for you. And also, like, I love you, and I want to be able to celebrate you publicly.
Yes.
For that expression, not wanting to hide it or shut you down or yuck your yum.
Yeah.
And I mean, it happens a lot. And to be able to track that, that takes a lot of awareness of self, and also effort. It takes effort.
It does. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I've only been to Disney World one time, but I think I'm right on the edge where I could be a Disney adult. Yeah, I see a version, like there's a parallel reality where I am a full on like around my apartment singing Let It Go and Moana and everything else.
I think it also, to give another example of, you have a partner who has specific interests in different bodies that look like you. Right. So you might be in a relationship. We might be in a relationship. And my desire is for older daddies or young twinks. And you go, that's gross. And what does that say about me by association of you? Because that's not my thing. What are people going to think if you're dating a younger man or a much older man? Yeah. How does that reflect onto me? And that's an ego piece for you to kind of unpack. It's not mine.
Right.
But we are in relationship together, and so it's present.
Yeah, it's present. All right, we're going to stay here for a little bit because a lot of the questions that came through were about intimacy, vulnerability, trust, and anxiety. And so I think let's do this question now. When you're in that phase of early dating, and let's say you've been on a couple dates with somebody, and it's like, how can you trust yourself? Because as you were to build that intimacy, to create that closeness, all the while knowing, like as you were sharing a few moments ago, it's a bit of a risk. Like, what if the other person isn't feeling the same way? What if you're going at different paces? You want to move a little bit faster or slower than they do. What if you do create that closeness, that intimacy, and then it turns into a breakup or a ghosting? Perhaps, which happens all the time. And then you seem like you're back at square one, and you go through this period of like, I can't do this again. Yet I crave connection. I crave relationship. And so I'm going to do it again, right? I'm going to put my heart on the line again. Yeah. So I threw a ton of questions at you just now, Court.
So many questions.
So many, just a few.
Yeah. I think as humans, like our such a gift that we are given is our capacity to love and to care and to keep ourselves from having that, from experiencing it, is a loss, regardless of the outcome, right? So you can't expect. Love has no goal, right? So if you are intending to love someone, like if you could let go of where it's going, of like, this is going to be a marriage, this is be my life partner. Like we tend to go into fantasy about what it's going to be. And I think that's important, and I think it's valid, and I think it's, necessary to consider it, and also to understand, like, is this my fantasy? And is this something that's a shared fantasy with this person? Or am I like having this on my own? I also think, in relationships in general, there is usually one that loves the other one more. And, to have that conversation is really vulnerable. I've had that conversation of I love you more than you love me. Or somebody saying to me, I love you more than you love me. I know.
Yeah.
And for me to say back, that's not true.
Okay.
I would be gaslighting them because in my body, I understand it to be true.
Okay.
I also think people love each other differently. We love each other differently. And so to be able to name, I feel like I'm falling in love with you and I don't think you love me the same way. Is that true? For the other person's perspective, you could lie, say, no, I love you equally. But it does take a pretty mature person to say, you're right. You do, because what's at stake for that person is ego again, of if I tell the truth, I'm going to disappoint you. And there's equal risk there of if I disappoint you and you know that what you say is true, are you going to stay?
Yeah.
Because I really love what's going on between us. I do love you. And I notice that you do love me more. And what a gift that is. And, the way that I show love, the way that I receive love is very different than you. Can we talk about that?
Okay.
Can we talk about it? And, the things that you need to feel loved, maybe I could show up a little bit more for those. And, those are not important to me.
Yeah.
The way that you receive love, they're not as important to me. And so, the way that I receive love, maybe you could show up differently for me in those.
Okay.
Or give me a little bit more space because that's one of my love languages.
Okay.
Like I need some space around me. I need to miss you a little bit for me to show up more deeply. That is one of my love languages. I've added, there's 5 love languages. I've added space and sex because for me, physical touch is not the same as sex. I need that erotic sexual connection. Look, we could talk about what sex means to me and what sex means to you and how we could define it differently so that we're getting our needs met. But I need that erotic connection with someone or else I just feel like we're roommates.
Okay.
Or friends, which is also fine. But,
also fine.
There are people that are in relationships that are very platonic and, they have great chemistry. They're very social and they show up for each other and they're growing an empire of some sort. And but they're not having sex.
Right. This is really, really helpful because I think you're offering the flirties a lot of ways to have those perhaps difficult, really vulnerable conversations that apply to intimacy, yes, but also around pacing and different needs when it comes to communication or physical touch and sex. Like as you're exploring connection, as you're exploring relationship and partnership with someone, and like what I think so much about that early dating process is about, like, yes, are you aligned around goals, desires, needs, wants, lifestyle, values, right? All that good stuff, intentions, all that good stuff, of course. But two of the things that you're going to be navigating in early dating are a little bit of power dynamics, right? Who is more or less chasing who? There is an element of that present, regardless of who you're dating. Gender, sexuality doesn't matter. And also navigating your differences. No two people are going to be exactly alike and compatible in all ways. Probably. I mean, probably not. Right? So it's about how are you going to navigate those differences, and in the process of navigating those differences, create that intimacy.
Yeah, I think that the navigating differences, like it's a given that there's going to be differences.
Yes.
And I think also recognizing, this is not necessarily for younger people, but people that have been dating, people that have been doing things, of recognizing what your patterns have been in the past. Like, do you rush in? Do you rush in and like that's your pattern of like you love bomb people, or you just like fall in love with the first person that shows you attention?
Yeah.
Or are you more aloof and like you kind of think everything is going to go bad from the get-go? Like of actually looking back on your past experiences and going, oh, I have a pattern.
Yeah.
And I want to make a different choice for myself. in this pathway of trying something new, which is, okay, I always fall in line of I rush in. So I'm going to sit back and just see how that is for me. Again, a practice. We're making a little experiment for ourselves.
Oh my gosh. It's a practice for sure. I wanted to ask you, again, specific to intimacy, like you mentioned something a few moments ago around kind of too much too soon, so to speak. And so I want to get a little bit more perspective on that, because I feel like I work with a lot of daters that do rush in. They do attach quickly. They do expect relationships and connections to move quickly. There's this sometimes an impatience, and part of that impatience is, well, I don't want to waste my time, right? I don't want to settle. I don't want to, go all in on this connection only for them to disappear or ghost. There may be a lot of texting. That's oftentimes a part of this. So you're in sometimes constant connection with somebody, but connection doesn't necessarily mean or equate with intimacy.
Yeah, I think there's actually so much there. I'm going to start with the texting piece, because what I find a lot, and I'm just going to go to the apps first, which is we can get our erotic needs met from erotic texting and conversation. And, if you're having those conversations at 10 p.m. at the end of your workday, and you started your day at 5 p.m. at the gym, and then you had a work lunch or a meeting, and you're pretty full at that point. And so to be having a text conversation at 10 p.m. and you're turned on, but the thought of actually leaving your bedroom and having sex with someone at, 11 o'clock at night, to only come home at midnight or whatever it is, it's sort of like takes a lot of effort. And so a lot of people are getting those needs met through the text. Totally. And so if you're wanting to have more in-person connection with someone, cut it out.
Okay.
Hey, I love this. And when are we meeting? Let's meet tomorrow. And lead a conversation, with what you want. That's a big thing that I work with clients around is, what do you want? It's a lot easier to ask for what you want when you know. But some people don't know. The gay community, I'm just gonna say men in general. Okay. We're very visual, and we have a very kind of stuck idea of who we should be in relationship with and what we deserve, and who should be standing next to us and what that means for us. Proximity to beauty is really a thing, and that's another ego thing. So we got this beautiful candy on our arm, but do they make us feel safe? Do they stimulate us in the way that we need to be stimulated, whether that's sexually, emotionally, mentally? If not, then we're not with the right person. We're with like an image of what we think we're supposed to have. Yeah. And that gets that, those are like narratives that need unpacking and some time to be like, actually, it's this person. I have this person is not my type at all, but there's just like, I'm listening, right? Going back to listening to an embodied experience, which is there's some attraction here. And instead of like denying it because you don't fit some kind of mold, there's a lot of power in that of, definitely. I don't know. I don't get it. And I'm just, that's for me really important. And like my type is like fucking all over the map. It's just like, I feel chemistry with you. There's something about you, something that you said that I resonate with, and you're interesting to me. And I don't question it anymore.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Are you flirting with me, Court?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, I am.
I love it.
We're having your mustache is flirting with my beard. We're having a little flirty.
We're just tickling each other with our facial hair, back and forth over camera.
Little Eskimo kisses.
This is, just a fascinating conversation. I'm glancing down at the clock and I want to get a few more questions in. I feel like I could talk to you for seriously hours and hours. I want to set the flirties up now, going back to self-trust and somatic healing, embodied experiences, and offering the flirties a few somatic practices that they could bring into their own dating lives, into their own love lives when they are looking to develop those connections, partnerships, relationships, and they feel like maybe they're hesitating expressing a need. Maybe they're unsure what that is. Maybe they are, sensing a shift in energy, which happens all the time. Doesn't mean something's wrong, right? We all we're just so busy, and it may be someone is just tired. It's really all there is to it. But when we're having those moments of anxiety, of self-doubt.
Yeah, I think this is going to be unpopular, but I would say
go for it.
They're all kind of in the same bucket of pause, hold, and slow down.
Okay.
Notice your somatic awareness of self, of, is this a clenching in my belly? Is this a tightening in my chest? Or do I feel open? Do I feel like an open source channel? Just starting to recognize your physiological response to emotional experiences. And to be able to pause and inquire of what that is.
The pause is so important. Sometimes I'll say in yoga, and I got this from one of my favorite teachers, Jamie, who was on a previous episode of Flirtations, she'll say to notice. Right?
Yeah, notice.
To notice. Without story, without attaching a judgment or a criticism that this is right or wrong, but it's about accepting what is. Just noticing, pausing, and just giving yourself that little bit of space is sometimes may make all the difference.
Yeah, and I think if we're talking about sex, one of the most common things that clients come in with is I have no libido, or I'm really not that sexual, or I can't get hard, and I have erectile dysfunction. I think erectile dysfunction is more a symptom or a naming of I'm not getting hard fast enough, or I'm having erectile anxiety, which is the thought of I'm supposed to be hard already, and we're 3 minutes in.
Yeah.
And some people, their arousal pathway is longer. It's a longer lead time. There needs to be more space for it to open and unfold.
Yes.
Whereas other people, their arousal pathway is spontaneous and it's just up front.
Yes.
And, to understand your own is important, to say, I'm having a good time. I feel aroused and I'm not hard yet. And to just sort of the more we think about being hard, the less we're going to be hard.
Yeah.
And so, we have this view of sex from movies, which is people pushing each other against walls and, this fit of passion, which can be really hot and sexy and fun. And it happens. And, there are other ways that involve a slower build, a slower unfolding, more of this kind of arc as opposed to straight to the top.
Kind of the dips and valleys or the peaks and troughs sort of thing. The arousal and libido can be, it's going to involve some ebbs and flows, especially so many of us, we watch porn. I think a lot of the flirties do. And that, it doesn't necessarily give the most accurate depiction of what sex is going to be like.
Yeah, that's a whole other conversation.
I know. I had it on my outline here, and I was like, do I talk about this? Do I talk about this?
Yeah.
No, I don't think we're going to touch it today.
I think there's, porn there's definitely a paradox of porn, which is, there's great things about it, and there's also things that aren't so great.
Yeah.
I think that the algorithm and the way that we view porn from a platform perspective, there's responsibility from the platforms itself there of, making compilations of cum shots and compilations of anal. It's that's not sex. That's not I was just talking to Cam Fraser, who is a friend and sexologist in Australia. And we were talking about this around, to watch porn that has more of a linear arc, to feel into your body of, how you are experiencing this arc that's happening rather than, I cut to the fucking every time, or I cut to the cum shots, or whatever your thing is.
Fast forward, you scrub to the climax or to the part where you just the insertion or something, like whatever kind of porn you may be watching. Yeah,
exactly. And so, there's responsibility from the platforms there, but there's also like, you have control there too.
User responsibility as well.
Yeah, you can choose different. I always love when people are like, there should be more representation of different bodies and race and all this in porn. And I say, if you dream about it, you can find it. Online. Yeah. You're just not searching for it. So, and the algorithm feeds you what you're already searching for. Correct. So if you keep getting, young twinks and you're complaining about the fact that you're not seeing representation of yourself in porn.
What are you looking at?
Yeah. Search for something different. Change your search query.
Quickly for the flirties that may not know, what is a twink, Court?
A twink? You don't know what a twink is?
I do, but not all the flirties listening will.
Twink is usually like a younger man who's got a specific body type, which is very like thin, hairless, very like boy-like.
Yes.
And I do think there's older men who are twink-like as well. Yeah,
totally.
Just like a young man could be a daddy too.
True. Very true. All right, I'm going to squeeze in 2 more questions here before we say goodbye. I got to ask you. I teased in the opener here, introducing you, that we're going to be talking a bit about eroticism. So just for spending a moment here, talking about sex. I got this question, of course, right? How soon is too soon? Right? When do you explore physical intimacy, knowing that, like you're sharing a moment ago, that physical touch and sex for you are 2 separate love languages. So maybe just giving some perspective to the sex part of dating if the flirties are having sex.
Look, I think, again, if you notice a pattern of going into sex immediately and it's just not panning out for you, try something different. For me, I like to have sex the first time. And if it's good, then I go back for more. I've had lovers in my life who I'm not in partnership with and don't intend to be in partnership with, that I've been in lovership with for 10 years, 5 years, 6 years. And the sex is always good. And I go back because I do have connection with them. I do love them. I do care about them. And I'm really clear, like, we're not going to be day-to-day lovers or day-to-day partners and share life together. And there's an acknowledgement from them too of like, you're not my guy, right? Or you're not somebody I want to share a house with or a home with. And, to have that level of transparency is great.
Absolutely.
I think it's a personal choice. If you find that you're, again, in a pattern that's not quite working for you anymore, try something different. I want to name something. You just talked about attachment earlier.
Yes.
And like, I get attached too quickly.
Yes.
I think we tend to look at attachment so negatively. And
we do oftentimes, yes.
Yeah. And attachment is absolutely necessary when creating bonds and relational bonds and familial bonds. It's necessary to create attachment. And I think I just want to name that. Like, if you're somebody that attaches quickly to people, like, congratulations, you have the capacity to do that. I think that there does become an inquiry of not am I attaching too quickly, but why am I attaching? Why? Right? Is it because why am I attaching to strangers? Right? Can I allow myself to understand them a little bit more before I give all of myself away? Yes. Right? Again, it goes back to feeling into trust before stepping forward again, as opposed to like, here it is. I'm jumping into the deep end, which I have friends that is their pattern. And they're like, you know what? If they don't want me from the beginning, then fuck them. And I'm like,
I hear that all the time.
But that's not working for you. Like, it's been 10 years and you keep repeating this pattern and you're still not in a relationship. So what if you were to taper and titrate a process? Just try it out. See how that works for you. And, again, make an experiment, try something different because, the pattern that you're in, it's not functioning well.
I love that reframe on attachment. I think that might be the soundbite. At least one of them for the episode. Great. I think that's right. The one. Let me put down, that was minute, what? Yes, coming back to the edit and post. That was just really, really helpful that attachment isn't, it has such a negative connotation when it's certainly oftentimes framed as anxious or avoidant attachment if you're on social media or just like doing Google searches and ChatGPT, and it's like this something, it's this thing that you have to fix, like something's wrong with you. But attachment is, in and of itself, isn't bad. That's actually critical, and it's necessary. It's what you want.
It's absolutely necessary. Yeah. So celebrate that.
Quartz. Last. What's that?
Just celebrate it, and then also, inquire about, how you might make different choices.
Definitely. Mm-hmm. All right. Final question here before I send all the flirties your way, to your socials, to your articles, to your coaching, and a retreat coming up later this year in December. I wanted to ask you this question about the T of the flirt, maybe my favorite aspect of the flirt, which is tension. And you talked a little bit about this earlier. You've written at least one article about this. And because sometimes we want that spark right away, right? We want that instant chemistry. And maybe we have it, maybe it takes some time to build, but how we can play with a little bit of tension in our dating lives. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Tension is one of my favorite things to play with in language and also in sex, in physical form, physical exchange. Peter Levine, who's a really profound author, talks about the erotic equation, which is attraction plus obstacle equals desire.
Ooh. Okay.
Attraction plus obstacle equals desire.
Oh, I love
and so that's tension right there of like, I feel attracted to you. There's something in my way of having you, and that creates more desire.
Ooh.
If I were to name something that's like desirable about me, which is also an obstacle, is that I travel all the time.
Okay.
I travel so much, and people that I'm in relationship with, it's sort of there offers a sort of longing for me coming home. And same thing for me.
Your love language being space. Yeah.
And I have a longing for them. For me to miss them is an important factor of me continuing to desire them.
Okay.
To date somebody or to be with somebody who is just always available and doesn't have their own shit going on or doesn't have anything to bring to the table, it's not that enticing.
Not gonna work for Court.
No.
We have another soundbite. I love that. Attraction plus obstacle equals desire. I just put that down in my notes.
Yeah, I think to talk about tension within sex play of wrestling and fighting and spanking and anticipation. It's not always the spank itself. It's like about me talking about how I'm going to spank you.
Right.
You better be quiet. Or you better sit down, or you better behave, because you know what my hand feels like. Just that for someone is like, there's tension there of like, you haven't felt it yet, but you're thinking about it. And then you have to kind of think about, what am I doing? I'm going to have to shape up or do something different, right? These are all sort of like games to play, but emotional and mental tension is super sexy for me to play with that, with language and playfulness and games. There's this game I love to play called Kiss or Bite.
Okay.
Which is like, I'm going to kiss you all over your body. Little kisses everywhere, hundreds of kisses. And every once in a while, I'm going to bite you. And so there is this tension of like, oh, these kisses feel gentle and they feel kind and nurturing and loving. And they're sending shivers up my spine. And then there's this piece of, when is the bite coming?
Yes.
Which is a totally different sensation. And once you feel that it's actually there, I bit you and it feels different. It might hurt.
Yeah.
And I might nibble or I might take a huge chunk. You don't know. but there is tension in that anticipation of like, when is it coming? What kind of bite's it going to be?
Yeah.
All of that. And it builds, what tension does from a physiological perspective is it brings in oxytocin, serotonin, and adrenaline, which creates this like cocktail of like deliciousness. It's like curating our own internal pharmacy of feeling like you're on drugs. It's altered states of consciousness, which, I love to work with people around because, there's so much emphasis on psychedelics and, altered states of consciousness through ayahuasca and yada, yada, yada. That is available in erotic experience.
Okay.
That is available. And it does take crafting. It does take understanding your body. It does take effort in knowing which buttons to push. And everybody's buttons are different. And so figuring out what those are to have like trance-like experiences. Super fun.
Well, ladies, we have to leave you with that. See ya. If you want to explore more tension, you're going to have to work with Court. Call him up, look him up. This has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you for coming on the show today. I want to send all the flirties your way, to your socials, of course, to your website to work with you, to learn more about your upcoming retreat. Yes, plug it all.
So I have an online community, which is like the low-hanging fruit. It's like $300 for the year or $97 for my course. I have an expert come on once a month and take over. Cam Fraser was just on this last month, who's such a brilliant sex educator from Australia. So different educators coming on and sharing their experiences and their expertise, and then my online course. So that's, if you're somewhere that you can't come work with me or you don't don't have the funds necessarily, that's a great place to start. That's on my website, my community. I do have a big event coming up in December 4th through the 7th in Joshua Tree, California, called Connect. I do this event like once or twice a year. It's usually around 20 to 30 men, and we gather for 4 days and explore different forms of connection, different portals into connection, whether that be BDSM practices, whether it be sacred sexuality, breath, movement, sound, fantasy exploration and play, exploring our kinks and our core erotic themes. And it really just, bringing men together in community to explore, to be vulnerable with each other, to create this space to open and share with one another. A lot of men come that do have and have had trauma, and it shows up in our space, and to kind of heal in community space is valuable. Even clients that come work with me privately, I say from the get-go, this is an important part of your journey, and I will invite you into community space, whether it's with me or some other teacher, because that is a big part of healing. It's a big part of lineage of kindness and generosity, is taking what your gifts, and bringing it into a large community space, and also pulling from community and bringing it back to yourself. It's really, really important. And I can't stress that enough. So come to Connect. It's my least expensive event of the year. Planning on having some really cool guests for this one. It's a really beautiful experience. So
fantastic. I'll definitely have all those links here in the show notes for this episode. And just real quick, your online community, is that open to all genders, all sexualities? That's for...
it's predominantly for GBTQ men. I do have some female bodies and women identifying people there, but by and large, it's for men. Cam Fraser is not queer; he's straight, and he just knows so much about the male body and male conditioning. And I definitely want to create space for different experts in the male body, in male pleasure to be present there. Yeah.
I know we follow each other, but I'm going to explore an episode of Flirtations with him. I think that'd be a fascinating conversation. And shout out to Jana Hawking, a recent guest on Flirtations, for connecting us. You recently were a part of a orgasm camp in Joshua Tree, California, for catering for mostly to women in that one.
Yeah. So. I work a lot with women as well.
Yeah.
There's a company called Back to the Body, which I'm a core practitioner for.
Okay.
I just got back from Panama 2 days ago.
Oh my gosh.
It was an 8-day retreat on a private island in Panama. So, the experiences that I create, that Back to the Body creates, just in terms of retreats, it's like, they're higher level in terms of quality of food. And we always have private chefs. The spaces that we're working out of, are really beautiful, inspiring. It's not like you're living in a dorm with 3 other people.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty tiny. Put me in your suitcase next time. I'm flexible with the yoga. I could fold.
Are you tiny? How tiny are you?
Actually, not that tiny. I am now 5'11" with yoga.
Now? Oh, you've grown.
5'11", $150 wet. So.
I am not tiny at all. I am 6'4" and I weigh 230 pounds.
Oh my gosh.
So I'm a giant human.
You've got some height on me.
Yeah,
just a little bit.
Inches,
Maybe throw me in your check bag just in case.
There we go.
I don't fit in the carry-on. This has been just again, thank you so much for being on Flirtations today. I'm going to send all the flirties your way, and really appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
All right, flirties, that's a wrap on this episode of Flirtations, the intimacy and vulnerability episode of the program with the incredible Court Vox. Thank you so much, Court, for coming on the show today. I love this conversation. I love creating this dialogue with you, flirties. I hope you enjoyed it as well. To learn more about Court, follow him, work with him, check out a retreat, some articles, all the links there for you in the show notes below for this episode. Check him out. Yes, and thank you, Court, for coming on Flirtations until we flirt again. Thanks, Court. And thank you to you, the flirties, for tuning in, for listening, for streaming, wherever you may be in the world. Thank you for being here. Thank you for taking in, enjoying this show we call Flirtations. Please rate, review, subscribe to the show if you haven't already. If you have, thank you so much. If you haven't, now is a great time. And then share this episode or another favorite episode of Flirtations with a friend, someone you know, someone you want to share some BFE, big flirt energy with. I'd love you and appreciate you for it. Yes. Thank you, flirties. Okay, signing off officially here at Flirt Headquarters. My name is Benjamin. I'm the flirt coach and gay Libra flirty. Now be flirting.